Next, we have Mindful Equity, I believe. Good morning, Aretha.
Hello. Hi,
That's a
Hannah. How are
very
you?
snazzy background.
I know it's either blur or this or bricks, so I just chose this.
It looks very grand. You've
It's
even
not
got a
my
grand
house.
piano. And
Behind me is
Aretha's,
a load of mess.
no, I love it. Aretha's partner in crime, Yolandi, couldn't join us this morning. She's over in Abu Dhabi, so she's here in spirit. But I'm going to give you your 10 minutes, Aretha, to explain who you are, what you do, and I'll be back in 10 minutes' time to ask you some questions.
So Mindful Equity UK started just during the pandemic actually. Yolandi and I were two senior leaders in the same school, and it was the first time that there had been two black leaders, female black leaders, on an SLT with a voice. And so what we did is we sat down in the canteen one day with a post-it note or a few and started to map out actually how we wanted to make that the norm rather than the exception. And so we came up with Mindful Equity UK, which is a company that supports teachers, well, people who want to be teachers and teachers throughout their career journey. So we work with ECTs, institutions around supporting EDI practices in the schools, in their training facilities, and we work with schools around creating EDI networks, just so actually there's a route for people who follow us into this profession. Thanks, Richard. So it would be remiss of me not to mention the summer holidays and what are summer holidays we've had. And we reflected on this in one of my workshops that I did. I work as assistant director for a local authority. And one of our colleagues got up to present about the impact of the riots. And I kind of sat there thinking, well, we kind of were here before, not too long ago when we started this company. And now we're full circle back to talking about children engaging in racist riots. Just call it a spade and call it what it is. And she said something really, really clear to me. She said one thing, part of her presentation, so I'm going to steal a bit of her presentation, was that all racists have, one thing they have in common with us is that they all go to school. And then she flipped it and she said, and one thing anti-racists have in common is they all go to school. And that really hit home because that's the whole reason we started this company. It was around representation and making sure that, going back to Hannah's very first quote, if you can't see it, you can't be it, or flipping that on its head and making sure that people who are coming through the education system learn about racism, learn what it is to be anti-racist, learn how to contribute to the system in a positive way, and see actually they can progress through a career in education should they so wish to, and be really successful at it and have a voice at the end. Thank you. So schools are a microcosm of our society, and in the schools we've got this huge melting pot, whether it's of beliefs, sexual orientation, gender, religion, culture, traditions, beliefs. They all come into our schools. And just as Jonoy was saying there, it starts really early on. It starts when those children are in nursery. It starts when they're in reception, and that socialization and that understanding of what it is to be different and what it is to be visible and what their value is starts right there. And if we don't have a workforce that's representative of all of those diverse beliefs and religions, etc., then we're doing that a disservice. We're not exposing our children to the lived experience and the interaction they get and the richness they get from interacting with a whole range of people. And that's why we want to make sure that our landscape as educators and influencers is representative across all of those things. Thank you. So I guess this is a call to action for people on the call, because for me, representation does matter. And if it's not you, then who's going to do it? And I chose this image on purpose because um, one, I like the movie. Two, there was a huge backlash for Halle Bailey when she joined the cast for this movie. And it got me thinking she could have easily just pulled out. She could have just said, I'm not doing it, just give it to someone else. And she didn't. She went through and she was really successful in her role. And one of the things that we've got here in the teaching profession is one, a recruitment crisis, two, a retention crisis, and three, a lack of resilience around ourselves and what we're able to put up with and what we're able to um, move past when we get into our education. And one of the things that I want us to be thinking about is actually, are we going to stand by and just let this continue on? So this cycle that we've experienced from whenever, certainly from we set up this company and certainly over the summer, are we going to stand by and just let that be the norm? Or are we going to be agents of change and stand up for what we believe in and be really forceful and make sure that our voices are heard? Not, kind of sit back and just say, well, there's no space. Like Sufyan said, we create the space and we lean in and we support each other to get it done. Thank you. So I just wanted to give some top tips to ECTs and people at start of the career, actually anywhere in their career. So my first thing is about knowing your why and knowing why you're doing it and feeding that into your resilient practice, like really sticking to your non-negotiables and that call to action for changing the system. Next slide, please. And the next one was about defining your values. So who do you want to be throughout your career? What legacy do you want to leave behind? How are you going to support those people coming up after you? How are you going to influence those who may be above you in the system? What are your values and what do you stand for? And what will you hold firm on? Next slide. And then my nugget of advice to those ECTs coming through: don't wait. Just define your career pathway really early on in your journey. Make sure that you know where you want to go. Get that coaching in place, get that sponsorship in place, because you know academic years go quickly as the summer breaks, but academic years do go quickly, and you can find yourself just doing the same thing over and over again, but not really having a clear trajectory of where to go. Next slide. We'll skip that one because that's quite obvious. Just want you to be mastered. And then this one's really important. So in terms of finding out who your sponsor is, you can list everything out. Thank you. So in terms of our sponsors, it's not finding an ally, it's not finding an advocate. Finding a sponsor is really different. Finding a sponsor is about finding someone who will put their reputation on the line for you, who will put their neck on the block and say, believe in this person, get this person into the room. They will think of you when you're not thinking of yourself. So when you don't think you're up for the job, they will think you're up for the job and they will put you forward anyway. They might challenge your thinking and your misconceptions about yourself and where you fit in. They will show up and they will represent you even when you're not in the room. And that's really important, actually, because often when you're trying to move up that ladder, you're not in the room. You need someone to represent you, who you are in that room when you may not have access to those people. They will promote you and have a clear explanation of why they're promoting you. So not just because it's a diversity hire, as Mr. Trump might say, but because you're really good at your job, you've mastered it, you're worthy of that job. And often when you're a black leader, you might have to do a bit more to get noticed, but your sponsor should be talking about you so that actually it balances out, because there's a bit of a imbalance in terms of what we might have to do as leaders to get our heads to notice what we're doing. But once you're there, you have the voice to then help someone else. So as Janoy and Albert were saying earlier, there are people that have helped them and now they're doing the give back. And I would encourage you to think about doing the same. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you, Aretha. And if people weren't familiar with that metaphor of the ladder, it's the missing rung report, isn't it? About the fact that a white man has all the steps on the ladder, a woman has them missing, but a woman of colour has extra rungs missing. And the Women in the Workplace report was published, I think, this week or this month. And it always talks about the experience of women of colour within the workforce. Can we just talk a little bit about intersectionality then, Aretha, for anyone on the call who's not familiar with that term, about the impact of intersectionality on you, Yolandi, and your network, on your ability to progress within the system?
Yeah, I think it's really tough to sum up in a very short space of time. But essentially, when you have layers and layers of different needs and different cultures and different identities, actually, it's really difficult to navigate the system. Sometimes you do need someone to understand the journey that you go on and the very specific barriers that you might face. So, for example, if you're a black woman, I'm a black woman. I was a young mum, so I went into teaching when I was a young mum, a single mum, and all of those things around flexible working, around how many hours you had to put in. I had to put in quite a few hours working overtime to get myself noticed. Um, and colleagues, other people didn't need to do that, quite simply. They just didn't. They would turn up, rock up, and their face would fit.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that and linking that to sponsorship then. How do you go about finding a sponsor, or how does a sponsor go about finding you? Like, how do we do a bit of Still a Black, sort of like matching up here?
Well, if you're an ally and you want to be a sponsor, then it's about flipping the way that you support the people that you want to sponsor. It is about that active nature of allyship. It's not the passive, yeah, we support you from the background. It's really going out of your way and sometimes having uncomfortable conversations with colleagues when those misconceptions arise and challenging those. That's what a sponsor does. Finding a sponsor is really difficult, actually, but you often find it through the coaching networks, and then you can ask those people to be sponsors. In your workplace, it's really a delicate balance. You've got to you've got to find your network, you've got to find your tribe almost, but you've also got to be really careful and really mindful about who is your sponsor, because you don't want to be pigeonholed. So often when we're talking about black leaders, they're pigeonholed into pastoral elements. So go and sort out year 10 and go and sort out year 9, because they're all mad and all crazy and they need someone to give them a bit of mentoring. And often that's not the right role. Often people want to go into curriculum and teaching and learning and that kind of assessment role. And so it's finding the sponsor that understands that you're not pigeonholed into the generic or the usual type, and showing them your skills. And it's being bold enough to have the conversation. You have to approach people and you have to sometimes stroke their egos a little bit.
Have you done cold approaching? Like, have you met someone at an event and then followed up afterwards to say, have you got time for coffee?
Absolutely. And that's how I got to where I am. I will speak up in a meeting. I will go into the assistant director's office in, big multi-agency mat and sit down and say, how you doing? Let's have a chat. Or can I catch you? And it's that kind of, you've got to have the passion, the belief in yourself, and show them that you have the technical ability to do the role. So there are very few questions left as to why you might not move up the system. So yeah, you have to work twice as hard, unfortunately, and hopefully one day that will change. But that's the current landscape now.
And as you were showing that, what Sufyan said this morning about like writing to Bridget Phillipson, like it's putting yourself out there, isn't it? And having the confidence in the agency to sometimes be the one who knocks on the door, being the one, or finding someone to knock on the door with you or for you as well. Thank you, Aretha. Go on, add to it. Go for it. What are you going to say?
No, I was just going to say that it is really difficult, and it's not to diminish how difficult it can be, because there are some times where you choose the wrong person or the person isn't genuine, and that can lead to a really negative experience. I think it's really important for people to understand that it's not just a carte blanche tick. There will be negative experiences, but it's growing that resilience and that belief in yourself that is so important to keep going.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's lovely to see you. Really appreciate the work that you and Yolandi are doing.